So before we dive into the deep end today, I want you to think of a show that you watched as a kid, something that you would say is iconic, like a SpongeBob, or maybe you want to go into the anime side of things, go Dragon Ball. And today's entire video is going to be about a show in particular that should fit with this category. However, due to events over the years and all sorts of different things, it unfortunately is forgotten to time. So, of course, as a child, I was always a big fan of cartoons, and still am. As anyone who knows me, I'm a kind of a weeb, if you want to call me that. From JoJo's to SpongeBob to Dragon Ball, you name it, I've watched it. But there's one show in particular that over the years I've watched anime and watched cartoons in general that has caught my eye and has given a certain energy and intrigue that few shows prior to it have ever done. And when doing the research for this, I didn't understand truly how much bigger than even I thought this show was. And I'm really hoping that with what I talk about today, that you can maybe get in a deeper appreciation, and maybe you can check this out. But let's get right into it. So, one show that in particular that I've really over the years watching, it's caught my eye. I've decided that it's needs to be talked about, and that is the wacky, the zany, the sexy, and the over the top show that is Lupin the Third. And what is Lupin the Third, you may ask? And the answer is it's one of the longest running animes and mangas in the world, with 5 seasons as well as 8 films, 6 OVAs, and 2 recent parts that animes that were on Toonami a few years ago, as well as a manga that has been running for just over 50 years. It's incredible to think that a show this big and so successful hasn't been here, and why you should check out this series. So let's outrun Zenigata, jump into our Fiat 500, and let's never ever trust Fujiko, and let's dive into why you should watch Lupin the Third. The series was started in 1965 by Kazuhiko Kato, who was known by his alias Monkey Punch, which was given to him by his colleagues when he first started writing manga. He was inspired to write the series after Maurice Leblanc's Arnez Lupin, which is a story all about an uncatchable thief. It actually had a lot of legal issues when it first started because, of course, Monkey Punch never got the rights to use the name Lupin. And just a fun fact, in the early days and early translations, he was known as Rupin or Wolf. The story is all about the titular Lupin III, which is about the world's greatest thief constantly outrunning the police and anyone who tries to catch him, with his ragtag group going on wacky and zany adventures. They always find themselves getting into a crazy, over-the-top situation by the end of every episode, and something I want to emphasize with the show is its simplicity as well as its very well-rounded cast of characters. Now, a lot of the series, especially in the older days, such as Fist of the North Star, you can even go further beyond that and go to shows like Astro Boy, which were very cut and dry, stereotype shows. And Lupin really isn't any different, as a lot of the characters follow into a very broad archetype. For example, Lupin, the titular thief, is just a thief. He's very charismatic and over the top, as well as the rest of his gang, which includes Jigen, who is the fastest gunslinger in the West, as well as Goemon, who is a silent, stoic samurai, and Fujiko, which is a very important talking point, which I'll talk briefly about her a little later. And she fills the role of a femme fatale, as well as Lupin's love interest. And then, of course, on top of that, you have the man who is crazy enough to chase after Lupin, and that is Inspector Zenigata. And Zenigata is a real fun character because he has he has a pure innocence and a kind soul, but you can also see the determination and ferociousness that he hunts Lupin. Something about the show that just is incredible is its essence to be simple enough where you can jump in and enjoy it. And that was actually one of the big points when creating the series, is it can go in any direction. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why it does so well. Of course, the anime itself didn't get started until 1969. However, the manga first graced the pages of weekly manga action in 1967. It quickly became popular with adults, as it was the first piece of manga to be explicitly for adults, with raunchy humor as well as profanities and explicit violence, which really wasn't seen at that time. Now, something to note is, with the manga in particular, is because of the time span it was written, I want to address this, and now this is more of a preference. However, the manga does treat its characters with a much darker tone, and characters are typically seen more sadistic and a little more shallow than their anime counterparts. I think that was just something to put as note in this video, and I thought it was worth noting. Something that's fun about Lupin the Third in particular, though, is with it has a certain charm to it, really. And that charm is a sense that you're watching something that you feel familiar with, but it's also something completely new. It inspired a lot, too, afterwards, with its heavy spy themes, as well as a lot of twists and turns, kind of a mystery, adventure. It's very over the top. Of course, the original part of the anime, which was 23 episodes, was released with insanely positive reviews. Something to note is about this show is it's actually one of the most accessible animes and shows there is, as because there's so much there, a lot of people get intimidated and want to go away from it. But something to know is it's an episodic series. I think that's something very important, as an episodic series typically runs and, does its little story and then ends, which makes it very accessible. Of course, there are episodes that dive deeper into the characters and give you some background, but what's nice about this is that is not needed to enjoy this story, as the story is pretty cut and dry, and it does what it needs to do, and does what it wants to do. It actually really gives me a good, Hanna-Barbera vibes, It's definitely an older series, but it gives you a lot of moments. It gives you crazy, over-the-top action sequences. It also gives you heartfelt characters and really sincere moments, and it's something special. It's hard almost to discuss this. I was actually intimidated to do this for a while, and I held it off for a while, because talking about a show as influential and as long-running as Lupin the Third has been, it's tough to really express the true emotions and feelings towards a show that I've watched the entirety of. Something to note, though, is the anime was directed by Masasaki Asumi, who wanted to create a more universally likable Lupin. So one of the big things with the manga is the characters aren't as likable as they are in the anime. The anime adaptation and the manga adaptation are two completely different things. And unlike a lot of conventional animes that base their information directly off the manga material, Lupin the Third takes its own direction and does its own thing. So the Lupin the Third that people do know about, that very stoic, kind of charming character, which inspired Spike from Cowboy Bebop, is much more of a anime representation towards his much more cynical and cunning version in the manga. So, of course, it was directed by Masakai Osumi, who directed the first 20 episodes, and then it was handed down to an upstart animator by the name of Hayao Miyazaki. Of course, for those who don't know, Hayao Miyazaki was the founder of Studio Ghibli. He did a lot of the Ghibli films, The Spirited Away, Castle and all that. This was his first job. He would do several episodes too, but he would do series. It gives him, you can really see the early makings of Hayao Miyazaki in this project. Something that's interesting to note is that with the success of Part 1, Part 2 immediately got a series afterwards, which was well received throughout, and it led to several movies being made. The big one of notice is Castle Cagliostro, which is one of Hayao Miyazaki's first directorial films. It was one of his earlier works, and it's a great starting point for anyone who really wants to try out and look into this series, as Castle Cagliostro is the perfect anomalation. We'll edit that one out. But it's the perfect coronation of everything that Lupin is about, from its over-the-top action scenes, the mad twists and turns, and great character moments. It's a great starting point for any person who does not know about Lupin III. Something else to note is Lupin III is... there's a couple of reasons why it really didn't reach here in America. And one of the biggest ones is, of course, because it was so long-running. And anime didn't get really popular here till the 90s era with the Toonami era of shows and, of course, the Dragon Balls and Shonen series. Lupin kind of fits its own category. It's kind of a mix of a Shoji and Shonen anime. So it's right in the middle, happy medium, where it doesn't quite... It wouldn't have been a series that was received. Of course, anime, when it first came here to America, was mostly targeted towards teenagers, and a show like Lupin, which dealt with sexual themes and heavier violence for what was considered at the time, wasn't really something that the American audience wanted, as well as there was already so much out that people didn't really want to touch it. Another, I think, reason that Lupin III never got here to America and really worked was the name itself, the third. People, for some reason, have a innate fear of numbers in titles. It's almost like a precursor of like a sequel, really. Think of it as a sequel. For example, I'll use Shrek. I'll use Shrek as an example. Shrek 3, people aren't going to want to watch Shrek 3 until they see the first two. As Lupin, throughout the whole thing, has always been called Lupin III. So people think there's previous series and there's a lot more to go through. People don't want to do that grind and effort. I think that's another reason why Lupin didn't work here. Something to note, though, with Lupin is, and it's exciting to talk about, is the recent parts 4 and 5 that were done a few years ago and have been circulated through Toonami. It's actually a lot of people here in the U.S.'s first experience with the Lupin franchise, and I'm really happy they did that. It's part of the reason I'm making the video, because I know this is the first time that the American audience really has gotten into the Lupin franchise. Something of note with Lupin in particular is every episode is different, and every story has its own niches and fun twists and turns. Consistency is incredible with Lupin, as throughout its 50 years, there really isn't many blemishes. A lot of shows and that typically run for a long time typically have down points. Dragon Ball GT. So, with that being said, one of the questions I've always asked myself is why Lupin has been so consistently good in the means of its storytelling. And the answer is simple. It understands when people want it and when people don't want it. Lupin, throughout its years, has taken many breaks, and it understands the master thoughtfulness of Monkey Punch was to understand that people want so much, and when you keep throwing more and more out, and when you're kind of doing it as a cash grab, like shows like Dragon Ball, One Piece, shows that just keep churning content, people eventually get old. Lupin never overstays its welcome, and I think that's one of the biggest reasons why it's so endearing and why it's still consistently good now. I really can't talk about Lupin more unless I go into the characters themselves a little bit, in particular one relationship, and it's definitely the strongest point of this show, for me anyways, is the relationship between Inspector Zenigata and Lupin. Now, the relationship varies throughout the series, not surprising, but you can really see that they have a Tom and Jerry effect to them. It's Zenigata is always chasing Lupin, catches him, Lupin finds a way to escape, flusters Zenigata again. And it's a real treat to watch, and it's really lighthearted at times as well as very serious, but you could also tell there's a genuine care and compassion with these characters. They genuinely care about each other, but they also understand why they don't like each other, and they're not scared to do what it takes to get their goals, and I think that's one of the very good strong points with Lupin. Another thing with Lupin that is strong is the use of its supporting characters. Supporting characters in anime typically are used to strengthen the overall cast and story, but a lot of shows typically will cast their characters into a lesser role and not really give them good screen time. Like, they'll get moments and then they'll stop and then not get anything. Lupin does a great job never making sure every main member is utilized accordingly. Fujiko always gets her moments. Zenigata is, of course, getting his moments as he's Lupin's adversary. But you also get Jig and Goemon, who are always there in the action, and get some very good episodes dedicated just to their characters and developments. Actually, 2 OVAs that came out, 3 OVAs actually. Goemon's Blood Spray, Jigen's Gravestone, and a woman called Fujiko Mine are all stories directly related to talking about their characters, and it's a great thing to see. Another thing great about this show is its soundtrack. The soundtrack really gives a nice Bondian jazz mix, and it was composed by Takeo Yamashita and Yuji Ono, as well as the vocals for the intros were done by Charlie Cosi. It's very upbeat. It's definitely a soundtrack that I've put many songs onto my playlist, and it's incredible. And Lupin's bold as well. It's not scared to go over the top. And something interesting about Lupin is is broken down into parts. Specifically, something Monkey Punch did for fans is he actually colored each jacket from different parts. So each jacket is actually a different type of story that Monkey Punch wanted to tell. So it starts out with the green jacket, which the green jacket is definitely the darkest of Lupin, as well as the most serious. Then you have the red, which is the over-the-top action. That's the Bond type Lupin. Pink is Hanna-Barbera slapstick comedy, and then you have the blue, which is more of a character-driven melodrama. And something that's really cool about that is it makes it so it almost creates content that everyone will like, because maybe somebody wants something a little more light beat, they can watch the pink jacket. Somebody wants something serious, they'll watch the green jacket. Maybe they want a little melodrama, they'll watch the blue jacket. I find that it's one of the coolest things in fiction to see somebody kind of give a visual hint and representation to its user of what kind of story it will be. And I definitely recommend that if you're intimidated by the episode count, to watch it by jacket. Which is another thing. Lupin can be approached in many ways. It doesn't have to be watched in a canonical order like a lot of shows. Of course, there is a lot of content to watch, as there is over 500 episodes of Lupin. However, you can watch it in several ways. There is a canonical way of watching it. However, that way, of course, can be a grind, and a lot of people can be intimidated by that. Another way to do it is, of course, by the jackets. Or you could do it, because for the first time ever, Lupin has done an interconnected story with parts 4 and part 5. Each of those 2 parts have a connected story within them, which also can be a precursor to a few of the movies. So there's actually several ways to watch it, and each way delivers a different experience. And that's another thing. It's truly an experience. It's not just a show, because there's a certain rustic charm. It's something that you feel is not. It's just different, and it's bold, and it's cool, and it's everything you would want from your thieving show. I think something to really notice is it's another show that really doesn't it sticks to its core concepts. It sticks to what it knows, and it's great. It's one of those things where it's not scared to jump out of the way and do whatever it wants, but it also understands the core ideals of the characters. And really, with that knowledge, that's all it needs to do, is understand what the characters will do, and shows us what they do to a certain situation. So, with that being said, Lupin III, I could go on for hours with Lupin, but I think really to drive home is Lupin as a show is just a charming show, with oddly designed characters and really fun, almost adventurous, childlike story, and I really don't know what to say. It's go watch Lupin the Third. It's so good, and to say that this show isn't incredible would be undermining it. It really would. I know that it has that staying power, and it's always gonna have content. It's always going to, but it also knows that as a series, it's not gonna force it down your throat, and I think that's one of the best things about it. Is it always feels fresh when you see it. I don't have much more to say. You have to watch it to understand the over-the-top, great characters, and the fun soundtrack, and the really goofy, over-the-top comedy. And it's just a show to be watched. It's really not one that I can talk about, and that's part of the reason that this is such a difficult episode to do, is because you just can't. There's so much to talk about. And there's so many interesting things to discuss. All I can say is go watch. Go watch.